Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi, and with me today a very special guest, Campbell Wilson, the Managing Director and CEO of Air India, India's most favorite airline, at least the brand. Campbell, thank you very much for joining us here on the India Today group. A year and a half ago, the Tata Group sort of re-entered the cockpit of Air India, and you, the pilot in command, if I may say that. How's it been flying Air India for the last year or so?
It's been a whirlwind of excitement and action. After many years of government ownership, returning Air India to the private fold, together with Air India Express, and then subsequently Air Asia India, there's been a lot of transformation that we've undertaken, a lot of people that we've brought into the business, a lot of systems that we've deployed, a new culture that we're trying to create. But it's been full on, but very, very exciting.
Do you think a similar transformation has been attempted anywhere else in the world, taking an airline back out of government hands, merging 3 or 4, trying all that you said, including a new culture and getting back market share?
Well, I don't believe so. I think certainly elements of it have been done before, public sector moving back into private sector, merger of airlines. But I don't think that there's been something happening quite of this scale. Taking a business like Air India into private ownership was described by The Economist magazine as the Everest of corporate turnarounds. And then you've got the merger of 3 other airlines. You've got what was the world's largest aircraft order at the time of purchase. You've got all of these things happening concurrently. So it's certainly a big challenge, but I think it's befitting of the scale and ambition of India and clearly of Air India.
Describe the scale, because we've heard, and the Vihan turnaround plan is known to us, but for the average person, and of course the flyer, what's the scale of the ambition for what the new Air India will eventually be?
Well, I think the most direct evidence of that is the 470 aircraft that we committed to purchasing on top of 36 or so aircraft that we've committed to leasing in. And that really is just the beginning of what will be the journey of Air India. India is already by some measures the 3rd largest aviation market in the world. It is growing at a faster pace than all of the other major markets. India's geography is second to none with respect to the ability to connect different regions. The diaspora is 37 million people, depending on how you count it, across all of the major markets in the world. Yet the number of wide-body aircraft and the scale of the network is still relatively, it's very, very small relative to what I've just described. So the opportunity for expansion is absolutely massive. The opportunity to reach the rest of the world and put India's stamp and the new Air India's stamp on the world is ahead of us. And so we're very excited by it.
Tell our viewers about the scale of the ambition, because for the average flyer, sometimes the difference between a wide body and a narrow body doesn't really come through. So what's the scale of the ambition that you have?
Well, I think that number one piece of evidence for that is the 470 aircraft that we've committed to purchase earlier this year, as well as the 36 odd aircraft that we're leasing on top of it. India is, by some measures, the 3rd largest aviation market in the world. It's growing at a compound rate of about 8%. Yet it is very sparsely served by Indian operated wide-body aircraft. There's less than 50 in the country, which is a mere fraction of what even smaller countries often operate. So we think that the opportunity to expand Air India is absolutely huge. You look at the diaspora around the world, you look at India's growing place in the global supply chain, you look at our geography, which is perfect for connecting different continents. And so we think this 470 aircraft is a good start, but clearly there are going to be further orders and growth in the years to come to put Air India right up at the upper echelons of global airlines.
I want to come back to a previous answer, which is the scale of the challenge. And I read commentary which said that because of the Tatas, there are tailwinds in favor of the revamp, but there are also massive challenges, including, for example, the merger. Tell us, where does that exercise stand? Because for the public, Air Asia, Air India Express, the low-cost airline, Air India itself, and the premium play that Vistara is, getting all of that together.
Well, it's certainly complex. The one that's most advanced is the 2 low-cost airlines coming together. They received their competition clearance to merge about a year ago. Since then, we have integrated the two management teams. They operate under a single CEO. We've integrated the reservation systems and most of the interfaces for the customer. We're in the process of going to deploy a common brand across the two businesses. And so essentially, they're operating increasingly as one. They are still going through the NCLT process, which allows them to do the legal merger and then the two AOCs to be merged into one. But effectively, it is now starting to operate as a single airline. The two full-service carriers are much earlier in the journey. We have received the competition clearance from the Indian authorities. We still have some clearances to obtain from some international ones. And again, we need to go through the NCLT process. But in the case of Vistara and Air India, it is two quite different airlines that are still evolving, and we will decide when they come together more fully. Low-cost airlines, it was very complementary because one was domestic, one was international, and they could come together seamlessly. Vistara is a very well-regarded, established airline. Air India is still in the process of transformation and elevating itself. Ultimately, we will want Air India to be as good or better than Vistara, and the future airline to be the best of both. But we won't rush the integration from an operating and public perspective until we feel that Air India has reached the appropriate level.
You spoke about the common brand for the low-cost operations. Are you in a position to talk about that, what that brand will be? Has that been...
Yes, I think we've already publicly stated that the future brand will be Air India Express. Of course, what it looks like, how it manifests on aircraft and other touch points we'll reveal in due course. But yes, the future brand will be Air India Express.
When you unveiled Vihan and I was there, and if I recall correctly, you spoke about Vistara as a brand. You said it will live on in some way. Those are my words, perhaps not exactly what you said. The sense I get from your answer is that you're still toying with whether to keep it there, as a flying brand, or kind of merge it in. What's going to happen?
Well, I think we've stated before that Air India is a famous name. It's got 91 years of history. It is renowned around the world. It's very well recognised. There's a little bit of work to do to bring it back up to the lustre that it previously held. But that work is underway, and we've absolutely no doubt that we'll get there. Vistara is very well known and very well regarded, but more closer to home within India. So whilst ultimately we feel that the name for the business is Air India, there's certainly no rush to get there. And as I say, it's not something we'd rush into until we feel that Air India has attained the level that Vistara has, if not beyond. Now, we're bringing in a huge number of aircraft and deploying a lot of systems which will dramatically transform the Air India that is seen today into something that is very different. By the latter part of 2024, more than 2/3 of the narrow body fleet will essentially be new aircraft. A third of the wide body fleet will essentially be new by the beginning of next financial year. So whilst a lot of work has been happening behind the scenes over the last 18 months, the next 18 months we'll see a lot of that start to manifest in the public eye and the way the traveller experiences Air India. So I think the transformation will be seen to accelerate in the year and a half ahead.
In the recent past, there have been a couple of incidents which are basically consumer behavior related, but has that sort of taught the airline something that it needs to do better?
Yes, and I think we've publicly acknowledged that. There needs to be better training about how to react to such situations, and we're providing that. There needs to be better information flow so that when incidents happen, we become aware of them. There needs to be better consequence management that, regardless of whether it's an internal issue or one that pertains to customers or others, that we follow up quickly and take the necessary action. There needs to be a performance culture, that there are certain standards that we expect and that we will deliver. It's really fundamentally, it's about systems, about training, about people, but underpinning it all is culture. And that culture is deep-seated in Air India. There's a wonderful service culture, but there are some elements of culture that need improvement, and we're putting a lot of work in to try and move this very deep-seated, very ingrained culture towards what we expect and need it to be.
Is that why you sent a recent message which said the old ways kind of need to change? You cannot continue down that path anymore?
Yes, well, I do a post every Friday to all staff in the company, And I use it, celebrate successes, give people updates on what's happening in the organisation, but also to demonstrate what the values are and to talk about topical things to try and help people internalise and understand what it is that we now expect, why we expect it, why it's important. And Friday's post, which pertained to culture and the need to evolve our culture to be in keeping with world's best standards, was just part and parcel of that.
Have you thought of your next Friday subject already? The one that's going to
I've got some ideas, but no, I haven't fully formed it yet. It's still a few days away.
Okay. I want to come back to the point about taking this company back from the government. When you inherited this airline, can you describe to our viewers what state was it in really?
Well, I'm not sure it's helpful to talk too deeply about the state it was in. I mean, the business had been operating at a loss for many years. It hadn't had the opportunity or the ability to invest in new technology, new systems, new people. There had been a dearth of recruitment of non-flying staff for more than a decade. But I think all of these things we've talked about before, and they're in the public domain. I think that the fact that the business still existed is testament to the hard work and effort of the Air Indians, but also those around that had contributed to keeping the business operating until such time it could be sold.
I completely get that, because it's almost a miracle that the airline flew in time. What's improved? What's changed? Because beyond what you're doing internally, but in terms of the passengers, the ultimate guy who really matters, what's changed for them so far?
Well, I can run off a list of things, but let me start with a few. So at the smaller end of the scale, all of the seats, the curtains, the cushions, the carpets on all of the aircraft have been completely replaced. We're now in the second and in some cases the third phase of going through this, so it's a regular upgradation. We've had a number of aircraft return to service with a complete, not an interior refit with new product, but at least new panels on the walls, new seat armrests, all of those things that have become a bit worn and tatty over the years. A number of aircraft have come into the system with that. New caterers around the world. We've upgraded all of the lounges in terms of ones that we contract from other parties, so that we're choosing the best lounge that's available in any location. We've recruited well over 1,000 of our own staff at the airport to provide more direct supervision and impart better service trained by us to the standards that we expect Air India to be. We've leased in so far 6 wide-body aircraft, with 11 more to come by the end of the year, to upgrade the cabin product. The new Airbus A350 aircraft, which will be the first into India, will come into India before the end of the year as part of a product upgradation process. And we've committed to the $400 million refit of all of our wide-body aircraft, which commences around July, August of next year, which will see the interiors entirely replaced. New seats, new in-flight entertainment, new lavatories, new galleys, effectively a complete replacement of the interior to bring it up to world-class standards. Website, app, reservation system, some of the other capabilities have all been upgraded. Call centre is in the process of transitioning to a new provider with improved standards. So we've been doing a lot. Now, I appreciate that there's huge expectation on Air India. I appreciate that people would like us to do it even faster than we are. But I just want to give the assurance that there is no stone being left unturned and no effort that is being spared to do this as comprehensively and quickly as possible.
Absolutely, and that's why you see a lot of messages on social media saying, hey, listen, my first flight 30 years, 40 years back was Air India. I would love to come back to it. In terms of market share and financials, has this turnaround started showing up in the numbers?
Yes, it has. I think if you look at our load factors, if in most months, if you look at our punctuality, although it's still not consistently where we want it to be, if you look at our passenger numbers, the turnaround is starting to show. Now, market share is a function of how much capacity you put into the market as well as how efficiently you fill it. But we have seen market share grow quite substantially. Air India was less than 10% at the time of privatisation. With the mergers and acquisitions and load factor and capacity deployment, we're around 26, 27% now. And so, yes, it's step by step. It takes time, but I think the evidence is there that we're achieving progress.
And what do you see happening as far as these numbers are concerned, let's say in a year or 2 years from now?
Well, clearly the whole transformation program, the whole Revamping program has one objective, but really there are two contributors to that objective. The objective is economic success, which allows us to invest in further growth and expansion and representing India around the world. But the key drivers of it are we need to be more efficient and lower our unit cost, and we need to be more productive and increase our unit revenue. Everything that we're doing is in pursuit of that. Now, you might ask, what about the customer? Customer is first and foremost, because if the customer feels that we provide a good service at a good price to the places they want to fly, we're reliable, we're consistent, they will commit their money to travel with Air India. And so all of what we're doing is about being more commercially successful.
Campbell, I used to fly Air India, still do. But one thing I've noticed is in terms of the tariffs. And I get the sense, and this is purely anecdotal, no research, so don't hold my feet to the fire on that, that Air India prices are now consistently higher on certain routes vis-a-vis competition. What is that a result of? Is it just that you're letting free market economics play and there's no government subsidy element in some ways? Why is this happening?
Well, I can't really speak to what is anecdotal information. Airfares are a consequence of supply and demand. They're also a consequence of how many people are seeking to purchase your product because they perceive it provides value with respect to when they want to fly, the manner in which they want to fly, the time they wish to fly. So we offer a range of airfares on every aircraft, and many of those airfares actually are below the marginal cost of operation, as is the case for most airlines. It is when the demand becomes very strong, the upper airfares become what is available in the market. And so if we are able to price higher, it's a consequence of providing a product that people want. If the flight is going empty, then it's the very much lower airfares that will be prevalent. But look, it's not in our interests to constrain supply. We've committed to 470 aircraft to expand supply. We're leasing an aircraft to do the same. We want to grow this market. It's a growing market. We want to increase our market share, and I think ultimately, as we are commercially successful, we'll be able to increasingly do so.
And you are obviously serving a broader, greater economic need also for the country. On that note, I want to ask you, have you had occasion to sort of raise the issue of how aviation fuel is taxed in India? And is that a constraint? Because, our viewers should know you're a global airline executive, you have experience all across the world. Is ATF an issue for airlines in India, the prices?
Well, ATF is an issue for airlines worldwide because for most of us, it's the number one input cost. And so anything that allows us either to reduce efficiency or to reduce the cost is very, very welcome. There's been a lot of progress in India in the area of ATF over recent years, and I think the government needs to be given a lot of credit for that. The way ATF is now benchmarked using an internationally acknowledged benchmark is very helpful. It increases transparency. The tax regime that has been applicable in many states, most states in fact, has adjusted so that there is a better price, but also we think a more conducive price to facilitate aviation and the economic development that brings to society. There is a little bit more work to do, but I think credit where credit's due, I think progress has been made.
A lot of progress has been made on developing airports in what are called Tier 2 cities. What does that mean for the future of Indian aviation?
Well, not just Tier 2 cities as well. I think there's been huge progress made on airport infrastructure across the country, and including at some of the biggest cities and biggest airports. That is absolutely necessary for the growth and development of this industry. Previously, infrastructure was always cited as a constraint for the growth of Indian aviation, and I don't think that is now so much the case. We certainly want this investment to continue because as we expand, as I say, 470 aircraft is a lot, and it's going to require a lot of airport capacity to support. We need this investment to be in place, and we're very happy that we're now able to give the industry some direction with the size of our aircraft commitment so that people know what to build for, how much to build, what sort of transfer and other customer experience elements they should be designing into the future airports. We think aviation is a huge driver and catalyst of economic and therefore social growth, and so we think it's great to see this infrastructure come up.
Would you like something to change as far as international bilaterals are concerned?
Well, I think the current approach is appropriate. We have access into the largest markets in the world, which are underserved by Indian carriers. We want to grow into those markets, hence the commitment of aircraft. But we also need to realize that India's aviation system is less mature, less evolved than many of particularly the Western markets, or indeed some other markets closer to home. And so it is appropriate that now that we have privatized airlines with good support, with long-term ambition, with demonstrated intent by virtue of their aircraft orders, that the regulatory environment allows for this to develop and incubate so that we can earn the commercial return that we've taken the risk to commit to. So we think this current approach of sure but steady, supporting the growth of Indian aviation and Indian airlines is the right one for the country.
And you don't want any changes to be made, at least in the near term, by the government?
No, as I say, I think we're comfortable with the approach that is being taken. There is some liberalization where it makes sense, but it is calibrated liberalization reflecting the relative maturity and evolution of the Indian market compared to others, so that there is a fair opportunity for Indian carriers to expand and grow and ultimately do what is in all of our interests, which is connect more Indian cities non-stop to the key markets around the world, to facilitate connectivity, to facilitate the diaspora's return, to facilitate economic growth, to build a hub in India so that we can build the necessary ecosystem around that hub. I think it needs to be seen in that broader context of national development.
A lot of people used to say, why is India not a hub? And traffic's been taken out on both sides. Since you mentioned the hub, what are our chances, maybe not immediately, but 5-10 years down the line, what kind of hub would India emerge to be?
Well, if you look at from a geography perspective, whether it is Asia to Europe, Europe to Australasia, North Asia to Africa, within the region, India is really perfectly placed from a geographic perspective to be a hub. In the past, it hasn't had the airport infrastructure, but also it hasn't had the airline that has been pursued, well, not just the capacity, but the strategy to pursue this. That has very much changed. We will always be predominantly what is called a third, fourth freedom or point-to-point carrier, carrying people into and out of India. But by virtue of building a network that supports that, we're also going to be building a network that allows people to connect from Asia into India and onwards to Europe or other connections. And so that will increasingly become an augmentation of the traffic we carry and a supporter of more and more frequencies, more and more destinations that might not make sense just on point-to-point traffic alone. We're already seeing it happen. You can go to Delhi Airport or to a lesser extent Mumbai Airport now and see people connecting off some of our European flights into our flights heading onwards down to Australia or to Southeast Asia. And whilst it's a small portion, it will increasingly become more and more significant and important as we build our network and our frequency, as the airport builds the facilities, as people become more comfortable with the Air India brand and reputation, reliability, product, price. So to answer your question, I think in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll definitely see India play a much larger role as a hub, even if it will never be our sole reason for being just by virtue of the population and market that we are lucky to have.
As we wind down this conversation, a couple of points. Now that you've been here, you sort of understood the domestic market. This is a question purely for the domestic market. What's your sense about the configuration of aircraft in terms of business, premium economy? There is the largest market share is with the airline, which offers just one class. What would you say to that now?
Right, I think the market speaks, and the domestic market on most routes is predominantly a low-cost one, which is why Air India Express, the low-cost carrier within the group, will predominantly be the domestic operator for the group. Clearly, the metro markets and those that have a high degree of international connectivity will still be served by a full-service proposition, but increasingly the proportion and the growth rate of the low-cost business domestically will be in the favour of the low-cost airline.
As I walked into this campus, and it was a surprise for me because when I first covered aviation, I went to these government offices. Of course, the Bombay building and now Mumbai has always been an iconic landmark of the financial capital. But you're now in a beautiful new campus and it's got a very software campus-ish vibe. So what went into this and what are you hoping to achieve from this integrated hub that you're setting up in Gurugram?
Well, the Air India group, particularly if we include Vistara, was 4 airlines based in 4 different places, 3 different cities. Air India itself had facilities in Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad and elsewhere. It was a very regionalised business where I think there were some 63 different premises that Air India did material business from. And that's not conducive to communication, collaboration, synergy, efficiency, just being on the same page as each other. And so co-locating as much of that as possible has been a key part of the transformation, if nothing else, but for communication, collaboration, and ultimately culture. We're very early in that piece. We've been in this new campus for a little over a month. Still work in progress, as you can see from the construction outside. But we think that this is an important step, foundation step, to build the future Air India.
Does Mr. Ratan Tata speak to you?
I've met with Mr. Tata a number of times. It's always a great pleasure and great honour. I hope ultimately we do him proud.
All right. And we wish you all the very best, Campbell, for doing this, because not just for the company and for the Tatas, but for every Indian who is flying and has aspirations to fly. All the very best. Thank you very much. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation with the Managing Director and CEO of Air India. If you've been, thank you very much for watching.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.